Sri Ramana Maharshi, a great and rare being, a jnani of highest order, a supreme yogi. He was totally worthy of the name Bhagwan given to him, which means God. He was probably the most famous sage of the 20th century both in India and the rest of the world. He was renowned for his saintly life, for being fully realized, and for the powerful transmissions that often occurred to visitors in his presence. At age 16 he realized spontaneously and ran away to Arunachala, one of India's traditional holy sites, where he stayed for the rest of his life. So many people came to see him there that an ashram was built around him. Many of his close devotees were regarded by their peers as self-realized. Ramana Maharshi always said that his most important teaching was done in silence. He meant that when people were in his physical presence, their minds were affected. In some cases the effects were astonishingly strong. Bhagwan's silence was his direct teaching. He taught self-inquiry to those who could not comprehend his silence, so self-inquiry actually takes a secondary place as far as his teaching is concerned. He imparted his teaching of silence by his mere grace-filled glance. This is the look that Muruganar and others refer to as his glance of grace. There was never a need to talk to Bhagavan. All of Bhagavan's devotees extolled Bhagavan's look of grace, however, even that look was an external expression of his inner silence. Silence was the state of Bhagavan and his direct teaching was only through silence. Those who received his message of silence had no need whatsoever to talk to him, much less a need for his instructions. How can I possibly express in words the mysterious working of Bhagavan through silence? Hundreds of people have described the effects of Ramana's silent teaching in books and articles. His second most important teaching was a practice called Atma Vichar in Sanskrit. The customary English translation is self-inquiry. Self-inquiry as taught by Sri Ramana is the effort to keep attention continuously on the source of the I thought. He called this source the heart or the self. He sometimes expressed that idea like this. Fix the mind in your heart. If you keep your attention on the source from where all thoughts arise, the mind will subside there at the source and reality will shine forth. When this is done, awareness intensifies and thoughts diminish. In most cases the practice must be performed continuously for long periods in order to achieve results. Sri Ramana often used the word inquire in the sense of observe closely. Self-inquiry does not mean asking questions except as an occasional device for reminding ourselves to refocus attention to the self when it wanders. Self-inquiry does not mean focusing on the physical heart or on any other part of the body or on any object whatsoever. Sri Ramana summarized his method in a pamphlet called Who Am I?, which was for years his most widely disseminated writing. The title has probably contributed to the widespread but mistaken impression that the method consists of questions. Actually, the main significance of the title is that the method is a technique for finding the answer. Bhagavan was born on 30 December 1879 in a village called Tiruchuli about 30 miles south of Madurai in southern India. His middle-class parents named him Venkataraman after Lord Venkateswara of Tirupati. His father died when he was 12, and he went to live with his uncle in Madurai where he attended American Mission High School. At age 16, he heard somebody mention Arunachala. Although he didn't know what the word meant, he became greatly excited. At about the same time he came across a copy of Sekula's Periya Puranam, a book that describes the lives of Shaivite saints, and became fascinated by it. In the middle of 1896, at age 16, he was suddenly overcome by the feeling that he was about to die. He lay down on the floor, made his body stiff, and held his breath. My body is dead now, he said to himself, but I am still alive. In a flood of spiritual awareness he realized he was the self. After this event, he lost interest in school studies, friends, and relations. He was absent-minded at school, imagining and expecting God would suddenly drop down from heaven before me. Avoiding company, he preferred to sit alone, absorbed in concentration on this current of force, and went daily to the Meenakshi temple, ecstatically devoted to the images of the 63 Nayanmars, and of Nataraj, wanting the same grace as was shown to those saints, praying that he should have the same bhakti that they had, and weeping that God should give me the same grace he gave to those saints. Knowing his family would not permit him to become a sannyasi and leave home, Venkataraman slipped away, telling his brother he needed to attend a special class at school. Venkataraman boarded the train and reached Tiruvannamalai, where he remained for the rest of his life. When Maharshi arrived in Tiruvannamalai, he went to the temple of Arunachaleshwara. He spent the first few weeks in the 1,000-pillared hall, then shifted to other spots in the temple, and eventually to the Patal Lingam vault so that he could remain undisturbed. There, he spent days absorbed in such deep samadhi that he was unaware of the bites of vermin and pests. Seshadri Swamigal, a local saint, discovered him in the underground vault and tried to protect him. After about 6 weeks in the Patal Lingam vault, he was carried out and cleaned up. For the next 2 months he stayed in the Subramanya shrine, so unaware of his body and surroundings that food had to be placed in his mouth to keep him from starving. 6 months after his arrival at Tiruvannamalai, Ramana Maharshi moved to Gurumurtam, a temple about a mile away. Shortly after his arrival, a sadhu named Palaniswami went to see him. Palaniswami's first darshan left him filled with peace and bliss, and from that time on he served Ramana Maharshi as his permanent attendant. Besides physical protection, Palaniswami would also beg for alms, cook and prepare meals for himself and Ramana Maharshi, and care for him as needed. In May 1898, Ramana Maharshi moved to a mango orchard next to Gurumurtam. Osborne wrote that during this time Ramana Maharshi completely neglected his body. He also ignored the ants which bit him incessantly. Gradually, despite Ramana Maharshi's desire for privacy, he attracted attention from visitors who admired his silence and austerities, bringing offerings and singing praises. Eventually a bamboo fence was built to protect him. While living at the Gurumurtam temple, his family discovered his whereabouts. First, his uncle Nelliyappa Iyer came and pleaded with him to return home, promising that the family would not disturb his ascetic life. Ramana Maharshi sat motionless and eventually his uncle gave up. In September 1898, Ramana Maharshi moved to the Shiva temple at Pavalikkuru, one of the eastern spurs of Arunachala. He refused to return even though his mother begged him to. Soon after this, Ramana Maharshi left the foothills to live on Arunachala itself. He stayed briefly in Sadguru cave and Gohu Namashivaya cave before taking up residence at Virupaksha cave for the next 17 years, using Mango Tree cave during the summers, except for a 6-month period at Pachayaman Coil during the plague epidemic. In 1902, a government official named Sivaprakasham Pillai, with writing slate in hand, visited the young Swami in the hope of obtaining answers to questions about how to know one's true identity. The 14 questions put to the young Swami and his answers were Ramana Maharshi's first teachings on self-inquiry, the method for which he became widely known, and were eventually published as Nan Yar, or in English, Who Am I? Many visitors came to him and some became his devotees. Kavyakantha Sri Ganapati Sastri came to visit Ramana Maharshi in 1907. After receiving Upadesa from him on self-inquiry, he proclaimed him as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was known by this name from then on. Ganapati Sastri passed on these instructions to his own students, but later in life confessed that he had never been able to achieve permanent self-abidance. Nevertheless, he was highly valued by Ramana Maharshi and played an important role in his life. In 1916, his mother Alagamal and younger brother Nagasundaram joined Ramana Maharshi at Tiruvannamalai and followed him when he moved to the larger Skandeshram cave, where Bhagavan lived until the end of 1922. His mother took up the life of a sannyasin and Ramana Maharshi began to give her intense personal instruction, while she took charge of the ashram kitchen. Ramana Maharshi's younger brother, Nagasundaram, then became a sannyasi, assuming the name Niranjanananda, becoming known as Chinnaswami, the younger Swami. Starting in 1920, his mother's health deteriorated. She died on 19 May 1922 while Ramana Maharshi sat beside her. From then until his death in 1950, Ramana Maharshi lived in Sri Ramana Ashram, the ashram that developed around his mother's tomb. In November 1948, a tiny cancerous lump was found on Ramana Maharshi's arm and was removed in February 1949 by the ashram's doctor. Soon, another growth appeared, and another operation was performed by an eminent surgeon in March 1949 with radium applied. The doctor told Ramana Maharshi that a complete amputation of the arm to the shoulder was required to save his life, but he refused. A third and fourth operation were performed in August and December 1949, but only weakened him. Other systems of medicine were then tried, all proved fruitless and were stopped by the end of March when devotees gave up all hope. To devotees who begged him to cure himself for the sake of his followers, Ramana Maharshi is said to have replied, "Why are you so attached to this body? Let it go, and where can I go? I am here." By April 1950, Ramana Maharshi was too weak to go to the hall and visiting hours were limited. Visitors would file past the small room where he spent his last days to get one final glimpse. He died in the eyes of people on 14 April 1950 at 8:47 p.m. At the same time, a shooting star was seen, which impressed some of his devotees as a synchronicity. His body was no more his only residence. He was everything. He blessed this earth by being physically present here. When he was physically here, he not only liberated his human devotees but his animal devotees too. There are many samdadhis of animals in his ashram who got liberated merely by being in Bhagwan's presence. His grace and divinity can be felt whenever someone remembers him. We bow down to the Supreme Being.